Okay, guys, welcome to day 3 of the Keys to Self-Mastery. We've got some really beautiful people here to share their experiences with us and to listen in and to learn all about the body. And that's what we're doing today, is how our body is actually working. Now, as we probably know, body is a really, really deep topic. Our bodies really just have so much to deal with. And I think what we've just been talking about with the girls is the awareness of the thoughts that we've been having. Can you imagine how the body is actually affected by those thoughts, especially when we make those thoughts true? And as we've just discovered and discussed, that it's when you have the awareness that they're just thoughts and they're actually not true, there's such relief. Can you imagine how your body is actually changing through being calmer, being more aware, and so forth? So I'll just actually talk a little bit more about what's going on with your body when you are having these thoughts and what it's actually doing to your body, and how, when we've got illnesses or disease or anything like that, how we can actually start to change them through this work, which is really cool. So working with the body, and I will say that it's actually a main focus of my work right now. So as you'll see at the end of the call, that I will be talking a little bit more about the concepts of epigenetics and so forth, which is Dr. Bruce Lipton's work, and where he actually has identified that cells in our body are all reactive to our environment. And so when you talk about genetics and when we carry on genes through different families, what happens is that we're carrying on the same thoughts, we're carrying on the same beliefs, because we teach each other those things. And so what he's actually proven is that our cells, because of the same thought processes, the same beliefs, the traditions that we all have, we're carrying that through the generations. He's actually worked out that cells are designed to react to its environment. And so, as we know, we are made of trillions and trillions of cells, which create what we would probably call, our health or our wellness in our body. So if we're going to start to look at how our body works, the cell structures and how our cells work is actually the most important thing to look at. But what we also need to know is our cells deeply react to our thoughts and beliefs, because this is the environment. I mean, it's in this environment. And when you have a thought or a belief or a perception about something, your body reacts to it, and also the cells within it. So it's very interesting, and there's so much to learn in this area. And when it comes down to self-mastery, could you imagine really having so much more involvement, if you want to call it that, in your own physical health? So what I've been shown is it's not the situation that needs to change, it's how you see it or react to it, which is the keys to self-mastery. So i.e. your thoughts or your feelings. So traditionally, when there is something wrong, we just try and fix it by doing something different. Like, that's what we've always been doing. But it's not always working. Like, think about something that you don't have control over, and especially when it comes to your body, if there's something that you think that you don't have control over it, then doing something different doesn't necessarily actually make a difference. It's actually, we've got to really go to the core of what's creating our behaviors and what we're doing, which is our thoughts and our beliefs and perceptions and so forth. So sometimes things won't shift because we can do the same thing or we can change what we're doing. But if the same thoughts and beliefs and everything else is still there, then it's not going to really make a big difference. And the thing is, if you think about from physical health, we think we have to do something different. But if we are doing something different with the same thought processes, it's not going to make a big difference. Does that make sense as to why a lot of the times things aren't changing in our bodies. And so we keep trying to do something different, but it still doesn't work. It's because there's something else happening within us which actually makes sense as to what's going on, especially when we feel like we don't have control, which is actually one of the major triggers to this, what you would call a dis-ease within us, which is unease. So we're born with a body that pretty much we know nothing about. Now, I had an awareness of that, and through that awareness, what actually happened is I realized that that can't actually, that doesn't feel like it's a good thing for me. That didn't feel like a good thing. It didn't feel like something that was right. How can we be born with a body and come in this body and literally have no idea what's going on with it? We have to go to someone to find out what's going on with this. And that just didn't make sense to me. So this is actually a lot of the focus of the work that I'm doing now. And even we know doctors can do multiple tests, and most of the time they just can't even work out what's wrong, and they'll try and put a label on it. But at the end of the day, you know, we really want to start bringing back the self-mastery, if you want to, I was going to say the power, but really it's the self-mastery of this body. So this awareness really got my attention, and it didn't really make sense that we're born with these bodies that we just knew nothing about. So via the work in receiving universal wisdom, I've been shown that it's the thoughts that we have when we have a physical issue or when the physical issue occurs, that gives us the insight as to why your body is behaving or reacting in a certain way. And that's this consciousness link in healing. So we, as I said, if we keep focusing on doing something different, then we're just going to keep getting the same result, because the consciousness is actually the key. So let me explain a little bit more. I don't know if you guys know much about Louise Hay. She created, a process and a book called Heal Your Life, which talks about the metaphysical link between physical manifestations, where again the disease, which is a lack of ease in the body, then is affected by your consciousness or your thoughts or beliefs. And she has a great alphabetical list in her book. If you get her book is great, and it was actually one of the first, what I would call, metaphysical books that I read. Actually, all these pictures behind me are all Louise Hay from her calendar from, I think, 10 years ago. So you can actually go into her book and you'll go into the alphabetical listing and you'll find out, okay, so what is the actual physical issue that I'm having? And she has lots of diseases and illnesses and things in the back of the book. And then it relates to what is the thought process or the belief behind it. So for years and years and years, for example, I used that was my Bible, to find out, okay, so if that's happened or if that's going on in my body, what is the corresponding thought or belief that is relating back to that? But if any of you guys have used her book or used that work, I don't know if you've realized that when you look at the answers, that, okay, the physical issue is this, and then this is the corresponding thought or belief. A lot of the times, I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but a lot of the times they actually don't make sense. So you go, it might say, I don't even have the book anymore, so I've lent it to a client, but it might say, for example, because I know it so well, issues with teeth are based around indecision. So when you look at that now, if you have an unconscious or subconscious thoughts or beliefs going on around indecision, which are causing the issues with teeth, what can you do in a consciousness level when you're unaware of what that is? Because it's subconscious and it's unconscious, like you don't know what that thought or belief is, then the book kind of only takes you to that point where you say, well, I've got issues with my teeth, which means I've got indecision. Well, I don't really know that that's true because it's not a conscious awareness. So this is where using, like I've gone deeper into what we can do around that when we have an unconscious belief or a thought, which is related to a physical issue, what we can do about it. Because in most cases, when you look at the relation between, or the metaphysical relation between the physical and the thought or the belief, it doesn't make sense because we don't know about it. So what I've worked on is how do we find out and how do we know about it? So what you've worked on, what we've actually talked about over the last couple of days, is that we're laser focused on our thoughts and our feelings in all situations. And I think that's probably one of the elements that maybe in Louise's work doesn't really focus so much on how to get into that information, because if it's not a conscious awareness, then you actually don't really know what to do with it. So when physical issues rise, it's also the same thing, is that we need to look at what our thoughts and our feelings are around that physical issue, and that actually takes us down the rabbit hole of what those thoughts and feelings are and what's the corresponding belief is attached to that. So like we were talking earlier, we were talking about, say, fears turning up. And I said, well, if there's a fear turning up, then you've got to look at maybe the story that's creating the fear. And then you go down, okay, so, and then what's the belief that's creating the story? And then you keep looking at it and looking at it, and you're actually getting deeper into your own consciousness and into your subconsciousness or your unconsciousness to then get the answer. And this is the same with your physical health as well. So let me go through a bit of a short list of thoughts that we can have and some of the corresponding body responses that I've been shown. So the main offenders to physical illness are usually the following conscious or subconscious thoughts. So get your pen and paper out. So control or lack of control. Helplessness or hopelessness. Of course, our amazing go-to anytime is fear. This next one is interesting because this is usually an unconscious awareness, is a lack of love. Then there's either the feeling or the thought that you're alone, or lack of support. And usually this one is subconscious as well. I'm not enough, or I'm not good enough. And usually that's one of the main draw cards to most of our beliefs and thoughts. It's mainly the basis that we all carry. I've pretty much found that 90% of people carry that belief subconsciously. They don't realize it. Anything bad or wrong, whether you make others bad or wrong, or yourself bad or wrong. This next one might be a bit controversial, but it's true. Responsibility. When you carry responsibility, that puts a lot of dis-ease in you. There's lots of unease in there when you carry responsibility, but you'll find out a little bit more about these when I get to the end of it. Okay, and then there's the shoulds, have tos, musts. And all the rest of those. And then there's expectations. So you've got societal expectations, which is the external expectations. And then you might have, again, parental or generational expectations, which a lot of us do carry with us, which without even knowing. And then usually from all of those, we create our own expectations. And they stick to us and we don't even know it. Now, these next two is usually what the doctor will say when you go and see them and you have something going on with you, is worry and stress is also something that causes disease in you. or unease. I'll call it that. And then there's any awareness of being unsure or I don't know. Again, you can kind of feel that that's like a powerlessness. It's like my power's taken away, which causes unease. And then even something as simple as indecisiveness creates those feelings and thoughts. And pretty much I could continue the list, but that's my short list of things to be aware of. Again, what I want you to see, like if you've written down the list and you've gone, oh my God, I've got all of those, don't freak out, because remember, they're just thoughts. And just remember that they're just thoughts, and you use the same process of, I'm just now aware of those things. And as I said, because we've got this subconscious life inside of us, we keep going down the rabbit hole of awareness and consciousness. But again, this is us getting to know ourselves, and then realizing that most of the things that are going on within us actually don't need to, which is really cool. Now, I'm sure most of you can identify with one or more of those thoughts, but I need to clarify this. Remember that the thoughts are just perception. So even when I wrote down, because again, this is all information I'm receiving, right? So even when I wrote down the lack of love or even being alone, we're literally in a world of nearly 8 billion people. So the reality is that we're never alone. It's the perception that we're alone. And so all of these things I'm going to show you, and this is where we say it's not the situations, it's not these things that are happening, it's our perception that those things are happening. And again, when you realize that that's the perception of those things happening, then you realize that they're just a thought or a belief or a kind of reality that you have decided is true. So even, I'll just say, for example, responsibility, like that is actually for me linked to my blood pressure issues. So the thing is that we can't actually say, well, Kim, you need to just lay down and not do anything, because there are things that need to be done, and there's things that people that need to be looked after. So it's not what I'm doing that needs to change, it's how I'm seeing them. Instead of me subconsciously seeing them as responsibility, I just have to change that to I just need to do them without the thought process connected to it. And this is what I'm going to get you guys to be really aware of, what you're doing and your reaction to what you're doing or what's going on in your life, which is causing dis-ease or unease in your body. And this is where we're going to start getting more control back within ourselves. So because a lot of our perceptions are unconscious, we don't really know what they are. And looking closely at like our incarnation blueprint, why we're here, and getting information from our soul voice, which we're starting to get a bit more of an experience around that. What's happening is that we can actually start to identify what is true and actually what is perceived to be true. But really the incarnation blueprints, the past experiences, things that we've learned are things that are creating this unease within us. And they're creating like perceptions, which create the thought, which is the perception belief, which then we think constantly and then believe subconsciously that they're true. So think about if you want your body to move, you send it an unconscious message to move. So even say, for example, now subconsciously I'm telling my body to do this with my hands, which I talk a lot with my hands. So subconsciously we tell our body to do things. We don't need to consciously tell it to eat food or to walk down the street. It unconsciously does that. So I want you to realize that when you have an unconscious thought for your body to do something like beat your heart, or I don't know, organs like liver to process food, or stomach or whatever, that's all happening within you unconsciously. Does that make sense? Like, you don't actually have to think about those things happening. So what I want you to realize is this is exactly the same thing. We have unconscious messages coming from our brain telling our body different things. Now, I don't know about you, but when I realized this, when I received that information, I thought that was pretty scary, because if my subconscious mind can make my hands move without me having to think about it. It makes my heart beat without thinking about it. It makes everything happen, makes my immune system do what it wants to do. It just makes everything happen without me thinking about it. What other things, what other messages is my brain sending my body to do that I don't know about? This is what I'm talking about, is that we need to start to tune in to what those things are. That the only way we can know what's really going on with it is when our body gives us these messages and signs, which are called pain or illness or disease. Like, when these things come up, and usually if it's a physical manifestation, it's been there for a while. So this is where I want you guys to use what's come up for you. And I'm starting to say, instead of calling it a disease or a illness, why don't we just call it, it's my body's reaction to something? Because sometimes when we're labeled with a disease or an illness, we're kind of stuck with it. Like, it becomes, again, the truth. If we look at my body's reacting to something and that's what's happening, then we can start to look at what's going on underneath. What messages are going to my body that I don't know about. But I thought that was pretty scary, that there is a lot of stuff going on in our bodies constantly, 24/7, even when we're asleep. There's messages going right through our body that we have no idea about. That's just this other world. There's this other world of messages going to our body that we have no idea about as well. But still, if these messages that are being sent to our body, which tells our heart to beat or tells our body to move, can actually make that physical thing happen straight away. Imagine how quickly our thoughts and our feelings are actually creating those physical manifestations. We're pretty lucky they don't actually happen straight away, but they happen over time. So our bodies are really powerful, and having that awareness, if you actually have an awareness that there's a lot of unconscious things going on, creating our heart to move, creating our body to move and our heart to beat and everything else, our body is actually fighting for a while those thoughts and processes that are going to put it into disease. But over time, it just can't do that. So if you have a thought similar to the ones that we just talked about, or a belief or anything like that, your body also reacts to that. So because, as I explained earlier, all happenings are based on either survival or growth. And remember that everything is about survival or growth. So if there's a disease, it means that we're actually in survival. Because with survival, remember we talked about with survival, what happens with cells when we're in survival is they start to shrink and they start to change and they start to try and cope with the environment. Whereas when we're within growth, they're actually healthy and they expand and they grow. And they all support each other as well. Whereas you can see the cells that react from the concept of survival, which are all these fears and anxieties and everything else, what then happens is that they start to shut down. And they just don't work as well because they're in survival. Now, the other thing too is we have this immune system in our body that is meant to support the body. Now, if you are in most of these ways of being, which you might call the fears, the anxieties, everything else, you are in constant fight or flight. So that's actually one part. So say, for example, in our mind, the message that our mind is sending to our body is you need to survive, you need to fight, you need to be in fight or flight, whatever it is, the worries or the concerns or whatever the thoughts are that keep us in fight or flight, that actually shuts down the immune system, because both the immune system and the fight or flight system can't work together. So in actual fact, again, most of our thoughts and feelings and everything else that are going on are actually shutting down our immune system, which is meant to support us and to help us to grow. and opens up the survival system, which is our fight or flight, which is why there's so much autoimmune stuff going on, because our immune systems just aren't working anymore. But again, I'm really excited, because what if it was just our thoughts and our beliefs that are actually creating, like you've experienced that a fear can actually create a physical reaction, yet when you realize that that's actually just a thought, then the reaction stops, and it can be as quick as that. So if thoughts, and let's just say a negative thought, is created or there, let's say happening, the body recognizes it and needs to then go into survival. And as we know, survival is the opposite to growth. So it shuts down as a response to the thought. So then the fight or flight reaction is used fully. So pretty much most of us, if we are continuing on the subconscious thoughts or beliefs around survival, and we've talked about what they are, literally we are constantly in fight or flight. So I remember a couple of years ago, actually, I was actually in Sydney for a national meet, and I was just walking along, and one of my jobs was actually as a manager of the team. And as I was just walking along, it's so because I keep getting lots of messages all the time, I got the message, "You're stressed." And I'm like, "I'm actually pretty chill, thanks." And they said, "Actually, no, you're actually stressed." And I went, "Well, that's interesting, because I don't feel stressed." And then what happened over time, I've been studying stress. And the thing is that most of us are so used to being in stress, we don't recognize it. We are so go, go, go that we just have no idea what's going on in here. We have absolutely no idea. And think about it, if there are thoughts or feelings or experiences that we've had which make us really unhappy or stressed, we will keep pushing them down and making ourselves busier so we don't have to deal with it. So like, I know, Marianne, you said, the things that are coming up are scary. And it's like, to most people, it's scary what's going on in here. So I don't want to know about it because I can't deal with it. And so it continues on, and we get busier and busier. And I hear a lot of people say to me, "Oh, I just need to keep myself busy and I won't be depressed. I keep myself busy and I won't feel this." And it's like, that is being in total fight or flight, which actually then shuts down the immune system. And again, I don't know if you noticed, but people who are really, really busy, as soon as they stop, what happens? They get sick. So it's just a constant unease within us, which is actually so crazy. We're really having to tune, like being able to have that self-control, the self-mastery over self, means we're not going to turn our back on our bodies anymore. We're not going to turn our back on ourselves. We can deal with what's coming through. Yes, it appears scary, but that's still the ego telling us that it's scary. It's just a thought. And most of these things are just thoughts. And once you get used to really seeing everything just as thoughts, they're just thoughts. They're not that scary. It's like the perception of it being scary. Again, that's just a perception. See, you can go down the rabbit hole of consciousness. And it's so funny. I'll have conversations with clients and things like that, and they'll ramble off everything, like all these things. And I'll just go, "Well, we just went down a rabbit hole, didn't we?" And it's like, they thought that everything that they just talked about was actually true, but it's just thoughts. It's so cool. I love it. So I don't know if you guys have thought about, or have you heard the phrase, thoughts become things? I'll just leave that there. Thoughts become things. And again, if most of our thoughts are subconscious or unconscious, that's a bit scary. Well, perception of scary. We're going to start to look at them, okay? And if we're not aware of them, our body will tell us through some pain or illness or disease. So there's a lot of links between chronic disease and the overworked fight or flight system, because the chronic disease is just really an autoimmune issue, which is because the immune system shuts down, so the fight or flight system can be on full alert. And I know, like, dealing with some of my own family and taking them to the doctors for autoimmune stuff, and it's like the first thing they say is, "You've got to reduce stress," but that's it. And we think it's a doing. I have to stop doing No, you don't have to stop doing. You can do, like, live your life and keep doing. Just look at what your thoughts are around what's happening, and that will reduce the stress. Does that make sense? It's pretty cool. So it's your reaction to the thing, not, and the thoughts to the thing, not the doing. So when you see how the parasympathetic system works in relation to your thoughts and your cells in response, it's not just positive thinking that cures what's going on within you. I always say positive thinking is like, putting a blanket on the dog poo that sits in the corner. It's like it just festers. You've got to really get to the core of what's going on within you. So it's a combination of recognizing the past thought as not positive or negative, but just a thought or a perception, combined with the knowing from the soul consciousness to rewrite the program. So say, for example, even I brought up the concept of positive thoughts and negative thoughts. They are just concepts of positive or negative. What if they're just thoughts? Again, bringing everything down to it's not good or bad, it's just happening. That's a really great way to start to balance out your whole system. The word that comes through is like alkalining your whole system by releasing all those concepts that we have created. Right or wrong behavior, good or bad person. Once you start to really release that, and that's just a person and that's just a behavior. Like, we don't need to put a label on it, because as soon as you put a label on what it is, it then becomes, and it creates a story around that, which then creates dis-ease in your body. So then what happens is that when you have an awareness of the thought or the perception, you then go down the rabbit hole of going deeper into the subconscious, like we said, by actually just sitting with yourself and looking at these things and asking yourself questions. And then you've got to keep the focus on looking at the thought or the feeling or the whatever's going on. Because sometimes when a thought or a feeling or a belief is actually happening and it's become part of your identity, which is saying that I can't see the difference, I think that thought is actually true. That's where you can get stuck and you can start to spiral. But again, it's your feelings that will tell you that you're doing that. So your feelings are really important. And it just makes me very sad where we're shutting down feelings with, I know medication is really important as a coping mechanism initially, but I think it's really important if we can learn how to deal with the feelings that are going on, because they're not there for no reason. Those feelings are actually there to tell you something. And this is where usually the feelings are actually saying that there's a story or a belief or a thought that you've made true. So we need to use the feelings. And it also means that it's gone so far as you aren't aware of it. As soon as you have a feeling, you just go into what is the thought connected to that feeling, and it'll actually show you. It's very, very powerful. Our feelings are the most powerful physical response that our body can show us as to what's going on in our subconscious, and we need to be listening to them. Our feelings are so important. I call them the inner alarm bell, saying, wake up. There's something that you've attached to yourself which actually isn't true. Like, how cool is that? So, so cool. And then as you get the awareness and you look at the awareness of it being a story, or the awareness of it being a thought or a belief, what then happens is that truth comes up. The more you do it, the truth will come up from your soul, which is that soul wisdom and that consciousness. So as I mentioned in day one, the soul wisdom and consciousness is the experience that Anita Moorjani had during her near-death experience, where she died from cancer. And she's an amazing example of how this works. She had died from cancer and gone to the other side. So from her knowing, from being on the other side, this universal consciousness and the truth about what's actually going on, and by carrying on the belief that her father said to live her life fearlessly, her body literally healed itself instantly. Like, she literally died from organ failure there and then. But as soon as she shifted her consciousness and awareness around the world and herself and what's going on, her body naturally healed, which actually shows me, and I've always been shown, our bodies are natural healers. They're naturally here to support and help us. So we've got to be looking at what are the things that are stopping it from doing it. It's thoughts and beliefs and stories and everything else that are going on, which is stopping our body doing its job. So again, looking at these things as, you know, if she can die from being absolutely riddled with cancer and organ failure, and then literally in 3 days they can't find any, like, how amazing is our body? Like, our bodies are amazing, and they are so powerful that we should be really tuning into this power that we naturally have within us. And so the best way to do that is starting to release this unease in our bodies and starting to really move from survival into growth, which is where it's going to support itself and we won't have to worry so much. So as I said, we're talking about disease and illnesses and things like that, but there is also that other element, which is the genetics, and that's another element that I won't talk about today because I'm currently studying it. So once I learn a lot more about that, I'll be sharing a lot more around the genetic diseases and, you know, how those environments are not only carried on, but how we can use that experiences or the information that we have from those experiences to, again, learn to heal ourselves, to see the things within ourselves that we don't know. And really what this is all about is actually using our physical bodies, whatever's going on within them, to show us what we don't know, because our bodies are messengers. Yes, our mind sends messages to our body for our body to react to them, but our body's sending us messages through illnesses and disease. So you can see how important it is to become super aware of your thoughts and your feelings and to tune into the truth of your existence here and the soul awareness and the universal consciousness around what's really going on within you. So what we'll do is we'll open up the call to discuss some awarenesses that we might have from today's call, and again to help each one of us to go down the rabbit hole of why our bodies are reacting the way that they are and what we can do about it. Because what I've been shown is that there's actually no real like connection to what you can't do and actually what you can do. It's actually what you can do, and what you can't do is just a perception. And so really dealing with the things that, like looking at what I can't do, and then seeing, okay, so these are elements again, what can't I do? And then look at what I can do, and then start going down a rabbit hole with that. Now, just quickly, if you do have physical things going on that you want to look at, usually, and there is a long process that I use, which is individual to each person, so I can't do a collective one for you guys to use. But I'll give you a bit of an insight as to what you can start to do to find out what's actually going on. So the thing that I do, especially around the metaphysical work that we do, is if we have a physical illness going on and we're wanting to know what the thought or the belief is that's causing the dis-ease in us, is what does that body part do? So if there is something physical going on, looking at what that body part actually does as to what that physical thing is. Usually that will give you an insight as to what the thought or the belief is that's going on within you, because that's just the way the body's talking to us. And that's where sometimes things can manifest in certain areas of our body, is because that area, like whatever that physical element of your body does, is actually saying there's a mental block to that happening, if that makes sense. So let me give you an example. I'm just going off the cuff here. Just say that, I'll just say, okay, this is an easy one. You get a headache. So let's just say you get a headache, right? So what does the head do? It thinks. So that just then tells you it's the thinking. Too much thinking, too much. So then you look at, okay, so I might have a sore elbow, for example. Okay, what does that elbow do? It bends. it lifts, it, you know, again, support is usually a lot of the things that the body does. So you look at, well, where am I not being supportive? Where am I not bending? Where am I not lifting? Where am I? And you just look at those thoughts connected to that, and start to go down that rabbit hole. It's very easy to, once you identify what the physical element is in your body and what that body part does, to then what is the mental connection to that physical. So usually, again, with feet or anything to do with feet or legs, I mean, what do feet and legs do? They help you to move forward. They help you to go places. So again, you look at, okay, so where within me has a fear or unease around moving forward or going places? Like, so does that make sense? How you work it out? And as I said, everyone's different. So that's kind of the generic way that we start to look at what the metaphysical connection is between the physical and the thought processes, and looking at what that physical, that body part does. Again, stomach. If you have something going on with the stomach, what does the stomach do? It digests things. It processes things. So what are we not processing, and what are we not digesting? Sore throat or throat. Again, what does the throat do? It helps you to speak. It, again, whatever comes through as to what that body part does. So where is it that you're holding back on speaking up, or unable to say what you want to say, or whatever? So that's how you can actually self-work out what's going on with your body, and then sit with yourself and look at all the thoughts and the beliefs around moving forward or about speaking up or whatever, and then simply look at them again as a thought or a belief or a perception. And really, especially for women in particular, around speaking up or whatever, we've got lots of stories around that. Lots of stories around moving forward, lots of stories around bending or being flexible, lots of different things going on. So, what does Emma say? Sometimes my nose constantly drips. Okay, that's a great example. So again, what does the nose do? It helps us to smell. It helps us. So what is smelling like? And it's like a really major sense. So smelling is kind of like a really important sense for us to be able to process what's going on in the world. Think about it, like when you're, so it's more about the processing what's going on in the world. I can see is that your nose processes the external environment, doesn't it? Like, so it's got your hairs and everything in there for when you breathe in, it's filtering, it filters. So again, looking at filtering what's going on in the world, things like that. May even look at, anything in the world that may be worrying you. Then if you look at the dripping, they say anything that drips or weeps is actually inner crying, like there's like a sadness attached to that. So I don't know, Emma, if that makes any sense. Looking at some of the different meanings, because this is where, again, it's all individual. You'll have different perceptions around what those parts do for you, which then will tell you exactly what's going on. So I hope that helps, Emma, and tell me if that means anything for you. Brenda's actually said blood pressure and what could be behind the blood. So I've actually just looked into that for me, and the way that I looked into it is I actually looked at the concept of blood pressure, and mine's genetic. So that's why I'm using myself. I'm like, well, thank you universe for allowing me to have this experience of a genetic illness, for me to then use my epigenetic work. It always happens. I always become the guinea pig of whatever I'm studying, which is why someone even said to me, oh my God, like, again, you've had like such a, like, are you okay? You've had such a bad time. And I'm like, I'm awesome. I'm like, bring it on. I'm so excited to learn what's going on. Oh, so Emma, does that make sense? Just tell me if that story makes sense. Well, again, it's all a story that we're carrying on. And Natasha, I see that you've got something there. So I will use the back stuff in a minute. So Brenda, you've actually mentioned blood pressure. So I looked into, and what I did around that, I say I'm lucky to do this, but anyone can do this, is if you have an awareness of something physically going on, you can actually just look at it from an awareness and you will receive from your soul exactly what's going on. That's a kind of a little bit deeper work, and I wasn't going to kind of say that that's what you can do because that takes a little bit of practice, but maybe not, because that could be just a belief or a perception. So you could get it straight away. So for example, if you have an awareness of something, you can actually just look at it and say, and then what will happen is you'll receive what it is. So as soon as I looked at the concept of blood pressure, I then received the awareness that it was from the concept of responsibility. And then literally I wrote down all the elements that, see, and this was all subconscious as well. I don't feel responsible every day. Like, I'm go with the flow, it's all good. But that's the story that's going on in my head, that I'm responsible for all these things. So, and doesn't that make sense that if you're responsible, like if you're carrying responsibility in your subconscious, which is creating pressure, blood pressure, like, it actually, when I got that, I'm like, oh, that's so cool. So again, when something physical turns up, you can go, wow, like that's so cool. Let's look at it. So that's what I've worked out around blood pressure. Again, it might not be the same for everyone, but that's what came through for me. And that's the story that I've got. And I'd have to tune into you to look at specifically about you. But to me, it makes sense that blood pressure or any kind of pressure, so responsibility may be one, but look at any other pressure that you put on yourself to make your blood pressure go high. It just makes sense. It's really cool. And see how it's just like, it's all relatable? Yeah, it's all relatable. So you can, this is why I'm so excited that, you know, we're born with these bodies and we have no idea about them. But I think through this we do. We have a lot of insight as to what's going on. So Renelle and Natasha have both got back stuff. So again, what does our back do? So our back supports us. Our back carries us, like, it actually is the main support for our body. And I know the different elements of the back do different things. So the lower back is actually related to, oh, thanks, Renelle. She's just back to the meeting. Okay, so the lower back is related to, like, it's all over health and like support in a financial way. So whether it's financial support or physical support or whatever, that's what's going on in the lower back. In the middle back, it's support of self. So the lower one is support from others, the middle one is support from self, and then the upper back is actually, if you think about it, the saying, and a lot of sayings we have actually tell us exactly what is going on. So the saying that you have the world on your shoulders, or you're carrying the world on your shoulders. And funnily enough, I was at the beach the other day and a man actually had a map of the world on his shoulders, like on his whole back, he had the map of the world. And I was like, you know, at first my mind went to, oh my God, why would you put a map of the world on your back? It's almost like it's a reminder that you have the world on your shoulders. But then my head, luckily my soul jumped up and went, yeah, but that's just a thought. It's just like, oh yeah, I created the meaning around that's what it means. So it's actually really funny. So with lower backache, Natasha, it's usually around, you know, financial support or supporting self. So lower is self, middle is, lower is others, sorry. So support from others, then the middle is self, and then the higher is the world. So, and our perceptions around the different elements. So, yeah, I hope that makes sense. I'm just going to open up the call now and see if there's any other questions before we finish up. Hi. So any thoughts, comments, questions that you guys might have that you want to ask? It's a lot to, it's a lot to kind of take in, but again, going back to simplicity. and keeping things simple. What we've learned is, again, just making it very, very basic. So looking at what the physical body part does, and then start to have that self-discovery of yourself. Like, say, I'm going to sit with myself and look at what that physical body part does, and then what is my mental perception around that thing. Yeah?
Mm-hmm. Mm.
I want to hear your thoughts, because thoughts are important as to what's going on. Marianne, any thoughts?
Well, I've been concentrating on during this is I grind my teeth. I clench my teeth every night, and my jaw aches and my teeth ache. And it's obviously inner stress.
Yep.
Hanging on to a lot of stuff that I grew up with.
There you go.
Yeah, I think I wash it out.
Just if you just, it's almost like if you can just sit with the things, and even, I don't know, for me writing it down is actually just really good to get it out and look at it. Even if you just sit with yourself and just write down the things that come to mind, and then just, again, it's almost like you're leaving those things back there so you can be here. I mean, if you want to look at each thing and see what perception you have with each thing, what thoughts you have with each thing, you will go down another rabbit hole of getting to know what you're carrying with all of that. And again, it's really nice to get to know yourself in that deeper way. But again, at the end of the day, you can see the difference between carrying and it being with you constantly, and it being in this current moment, to actually looking at what's really true right now. But such a great awareness, and so good to look at.
I need to get rid of it.
That could also be the ego. Yes. And so the thing is, there's that saying, and I want you to remember the saying, because this is the thing, we want to get rid of things, we want to fix things, but what you resist persists. So it's like the things that we want to get rid of, they will keep coming up if we don't want them. It's, I don't know why, it's just how it works. So what you can actually do is that you can, again, look at, is you just look at it, because the thing is that what you've actually said is that I don't want that, which means you've actually placed a bad or a wrong meaning to it. So even just look at the meaning of it, of what it is and what happened, and just literally just saying that just happened. That just happened. I don't know if that feels like something you can do.
Yeah, I've got to work on it.
Yeah. And it's just good to sit with yourself and just look at, you know, the things that have happened, and it's almost like you can just give like forgiveness to each thing. It's for yourself, because it's actually really hard. Again, the ego, when there's something that's happened in the past, believe me, I've done the work around it. When things happen in the past, the ego just strongly wants to hang on to it and be bitter about it, wants to be angry about it, wants to be self-righteous about it. And I'm saying this from experience. But what I found for me is, and you only do it for you. What I found for me is that I didn't like that feeling. That was again, the feeling was the first awareness that, oh, this just doesn't feel good. And then I just looked at it and realized I'd been carrying what had happened then into the now. And that's why it didn't feel good. And so as soon as I did, for me, I just said, I'm actually choosing what thoughts I have right now. And in this moment, I know that if I keep carrying that story with me, or the thought or the memory or whatever with me, that's what's going to happen. And that's what's going to be my experience now. Whether it's actually happening or not, it's going to be in my head. So for me, I said, I don't want that anymore. I just don't want that anymore. Not saying that I want to get rid of it, but I'm choosing to leave that where it was. And it's very hard, because especially if it's physical stuff that is happening with people around you that you have around you, and you're carrying stuff from them, and they remind you every day that this is what happened in the past. And it's hard. And I've watched the ego just go, remember this, remember that. And I'm just like, that doesn't make me feel good. I'm choosing to make each moment a brand new moment, because it actually is. Each moment's a brand new moment, and I'm going to make it how I want it because it's important to me. And as soon as I did that, it all just stayed back there. A couple of times my ego just wanted to go back. Come on, like bring it into the now, because, you know, you might not be okay anymore, or you need it to be on high alert. And I'm like, yeah, actually, you know what? I'm actually okay here. Thanks. You know, and as soon as I did that, that changed everything. So it's just about choice of what's important for you. And what's important for you is to choose how you want to be right now. And to me, that's more important than carrying something from the past that's going to make me really unhappy right now, because it's going to put me on high alert thinking it's going to happen again. I don't need that now, because I'm going to be the master of what's going to happen right now. And see you, darling. And I'm just going to trust that that's actually going to be okay. And what happened is it was. Because that's what I decided. So it's actually really cool that you have that strength and the ability to do that. Yeah, makes sense?
It does.
It's hard. It is hard, but it is just because the ego is here to protect you. So it'll keep bringing up stuff from the past to say, watch out for this, or remember that really hurt. Like, so remember that, or whatever. But then you go, yeah, it did. And you go acknowledging it and going, yep, that did happen. Yep, that did exist. But I am choosing, because I'm the most important person, I'm choosing this, however that looks. And once you make that decision, what happens is all of a sudden the things that you choose for right now just start to happen. And I just go to myself, why on earth have I carried that for so long when I don't need to? But you don't know the difference. Yeah. Until you have the awareness. So again, the feelings actually were the things that actually made me go, I don't feel good. I don't feel good. And let me look at why I don't feel good. Oh yeah. It's a story in my head of what happened in the past that I'm carrying with me, which I'm still carrying. So I'll be okay. And you can see that you constantly repeat it in every moment, whether it's actually happening or not. It actually feels like it's happening. It's the feelings that are there. So it's really, really, it's tough, especially when it unconsciously brings the past into the present moment, but your feelings will always show you when you've done it. Don't feel good. If you don't feel good, sit with it and go, okay, so what are my feelings trying to show me? And it's funny because I always read in, I don't know if you want to call it psychological journals, and because I've done studying on all of the mind and everything else, and they say that anger is a natural emotion. But what I found is that when anger comes up and then you acknowledge it and see what message it's trying to tell you, it actually disappears. And then what happens is the anger doesn't come up anymore. And I'm like, every emotion is just a messenger. So they're all natural, but they're all natural for a reason. They're all there to show us. And so in actual fact, we can be quite neutral, again, neutral within, and have that alkaline way of being simply by tuning into the feelings and dealing with them when they turn up, and seeing what is connected to it, whether it's past, whether it's concepts or perceptions we've created or whatever it is, and dealing with it, and then tuning into that soul wisdom, that pretty much we won't have those ups and downs anymore. We really look and acknowledge what's going on within us, and it's beautiful. It's just beautiful. So good. But it's the awareness. Like it takes a lot of practice to click in and to click in and to click in. And that's why when someone's really busy, it's hard to click into that. Because the busyness overrides the contact to yourself. So this is where, when people, like, I'm not a really big meditator, to be honest. I'm not really one at all, but I probably should be. Again, is that a should? It's just the time to tune into yourself. Give yourself the time, whether it's with a cup of coffee, you just sit there and just breathe and sit in nature, which you have a beautiful backyard to do that in. And you can just sit there and breathe and really take in the energy of the environment and just be with yourself and see what feelings are there. And they'll always show you what your subconscious thoughts, perceptions, beliefs are. And it's beautiful. Like, I get excited when I have a feeling and I go, oh, what is it that I don't know? It's really, really fun. So, okay, any other questions, girls?
Yeah, I have a question about feeling tired. I'm tired very often, and it's don't really know why am I so tired. Like, I always have a nap in the afternoon.
Yep.
And in the morning I wake up tired and feel like I'm tired when I finish eating at lunchtime. I feel tired. I have a nap already. It's not time for my nap yet. And so I go teach, have my tennis lessons, and I'm tired again. So it's just feeling like, is there something wrong? Or is it normal to be tired that much? I give about 30 hours lessons every week, so maybe that doesn't help really. I'm
well,
not
what
managing
you can do,
to go to bed earlier. I don't know. It's pretty late already now. I've got a big day tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at those elements. So you've got to look at the behavior. So am I giving myself enough sleep? That's the first thing you can look at. The second one is you can either be, the second and the third one is that you can either be tired, which then says you need to sleep, or you could be thinking that you're tired. So it's actually really good, because I've played this out again with myself, because, you know, I'm up very early most mornings. And so what happens is that during the day, if I'm feeling tired, I'll stop and I'll say, is that a thought or is it actually happening? And in most cases, it's my thoughts actually saying I'm tired. As soon as you it's really interesting. So when you recognize and you look at, I've got the thought that I'm tired, see what happens within you once you look at the fact that you're having a thought that you're tired. Because what I found is that you get the energy back. And what usually you are tired from is actually, I find that most of us are tired from overthinking when we're not aware of the thinking.
Yes, got pretty lot, often headaches too, so I'm thinking too much anyway, that's for sure.
You got two physical manifestations of things saying that you're thinking too much. So again, what you can do is you can just look at your thinking. Just take it out and look at it. That's just a thought. 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 And give yourself, as soon as you recognize that they're just thoughts, then you can just come back to doing. And this is what we're moving towards. We're moving away from thinking into doing, and being. Because, you know, to do things, you don't actually have to think a lot. But what happens is that when we are tired from overthinking, we don't want to do anything because we're tired from overthinking. But still, you could be tired from being tired. So you've just got to tune in and look at, okay, I'm going to look at the thought that I'm tired. And instantly, if you're still tired, then you're tired. But if you're looking at the thought that I'm tired, then it's actually saying it's the thinking. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's really fun. Like, it's really fun because I've done it for myself. I've looked at, am I really tired? Or is my head just telling me I'm tired? Because it doesn't want to think anymore. Again, it's a survival mechanism. You need to stop thinking to try and survive. And that's what it'll do, is it'll create the feeling of being tired, or the thought of being tired, so that you stop thinking. And then the best way to stop thinking is to sleep.
Yes. I really love having my naps, 20-minute naps. They're great afterwards.
Just check in with your energy as well. The other things coming up is around energy as well. So of course, overthinking always saps the energy, because there's a lot of energy in thinking. I remember when I started to learn myself to be in the current moment and not have any thoughts in each current moment, I realized I actually have a lot more time, which showed me that there's a lot of time taken in thinking. And think about it. When you're sitting there and you're thinking, you're actually, in most cases, you're not doing anything. Or when you're doing something, you're not doing it to its full capacity, because you're thinking and doing. So you're not really present with what you're doing. So you can actually practice just being in each current moment without having to think, but just to do. Like, I even test myself. You don't even, like, this is the crazy thing about us and thinking, right? So quite often we'll think, now I need to go to the bathroom, and then now I need to go to do the dishes, and now I need to go and make dinner. Like, we constantly think about what we've got to do before we do it. And I want you to watch. It's very interesting that this happens, because I want you to watch yourself think about what you've got to do before you do it. And it's actually quite funny. We do it. We all do it. We all think about what we've got to do before we do it. So I give people a challenge and say, why don't you just do it without thinking? Because you don't need to think about the things that you're doing. You just do it. And it opens up a whole new world. It's just like space and no thinking. It's just, but it's funny. You watch how often you think about what you've got to do. Even that's there. It's funny. It's so crazy. So what if we just got up and walked and just did the dishes and just made dinner? It's easier. It just is. It's fun. Yeah. It's really interesting. So just watch how much you actually, or Emma said she's going to try do this too. Often feels tired, but because it's stressed. And again, like, think about it. Of course, we're going to be tired when we're stressed. It's the body just saying you need to stop. But again, stress is from perceptions and thoughts that are creating the stress. So you need to go into what's creating all of this, and then come back to the right now without the thoughts, and just do. And that's it. It's really fun, and it's very surprising when you catch yourself thinking about what you've got to do and just going, I don't need to think about what I've got to do. I know what to do. I know what to do. I don't need to think about it. It's really, really interesting. So can you guys practice that today, and we'll chat about it tomorrow? Practice. Yeah. The thing is, we don't have to think about the things that we've got to do. But the thing is, again, if our bodies are showing us something, if we're tired, or if we've got a sore throat, or if we've got a headache, it's a message, just like our feelings are a message. So can you see how amazing these bodies are? And so often we just disregard it as it's just taking me from A to B. No, this body, and I know we have just touched the surface into how magnificent this body is. I have been shown that we can actually physically live to 2,000 years old. These bodies are so magnificent. So I'm actually really loving going down the rabbit hole of how we can do that. Because it is like, I don't know if you've read anything about it, but our bodies rejuvenate to brand new bodies every 7 years. Like, everything rejuvenates. So again, if that's not happening, we've got to look at what's stopping that from just doing its natural thing. We literally should be brand new people every 7 years. Like, how cool. So again, if we look at the thinking is creating those changes, let's look at what our thinking can do to take us to that place. It's fun. So fun. Anyway, we could talk forever. We've got tomorrow, and tomorrow is our last day. So make sure you've got all your questions or any kind of thoughts or experiences that you've got that we can talk about. Thanks, Renelle. Thanks, Emma. Thanks, Natasha. Thanks, Marianne. And
have a good day. I'm going to sleep.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, I'll have an awesome day. I find this carries me right through the whole day. I'm just like floating after our calls. It's lovely. So I hope you guys do too. And enjoy your floating off to sleep, Natasha. And everyone else who I know is in Australia. Have a great day. And I'll see you tomorrow.
Hopefully I make it tomorrow. Bye-bye.